First of all, I think that we need to establish two important guiding principles. Guiding principle one is safety for both teachers and the learners. And the second is that education cannot stop. With regard to the first guiding principle, I think it is quite clear that organizations like WHO have published guidelines on how teachers, students, and the larger population as a whole need to remain safe. And those principles are widespread regarding the use of hand sanitizers, regarding washing with soap, regarding using masks, etc., etc. And when it's safe to go outside and when it's not safe to go outside. So I think the principle that is important here is that safety is key. Safety remains important because when students and teachers are infected, they are not safe. Neither are those around them safe. So safety for both teachers and the principal and for teachers, the higher ups and certainly for students is guiding principle number one. Guiding principle number two is that somehow we need to continue with education and training, because if we do not, there is a risk that we'll lose a generation. And we certainly cannot afford to lose a generation. And nobody knows, for goodness sake, when this virus is going to disappear. If anything, it may be with us for a long time, or it may recur in various incarnations going on forward. So again, the issue of how can we continue education in the midst of the pandemic becomes guiding principle number two. I think it's quite clear that there are many things that teachers and the students can do in order to continue their education. Clearly, one of the things that teachers and students need to do, and this has been done in a number of settings, is to launch various virtual workshops. These workshops can really focus on how can we use various platforms in order to continue carrying out teaching and learning. The various platforms include the use of radio, the use of TV, the use of various mobile devices, and even paper trail. I have heard a lot of successful stories where teachers are using just ordinary paper to continue to ensure that their students are learning. It is important that these platforms should provide appropriate content for the students and for the teachers. And there should be a way of evaluating whether things are going according to plan. There should be clear systems of monitoring and evaluation to ensure that quality education continues to take place. Finally, there may be an opportunity here to provide a voice for students, because I think in the past we often think that students are just empty vessels into which wise teachers are pouring wisdom. But clearly we know that there's a lot of interaction between the students themselves in which learning continues to take place. So this kind of virtual workshops should also cater for that, because I think it's important for students to be able to continue to learn among themselves, since a lot of learning also takes place between students. But clearly, one of the biggest worries is that many students, particularly girls, might actually drop out of school. And in many societies, some girls might be married off, which means that their chances to continue education are completely cut off. So parents and teachers should be on the lookout to ensure that this does not happen. Also, we know that in many instances, parents might not be able to pay fees for their children because they are confronted with a pandemic, they are confronted with many challenges at home. They will not be able to pay for the education of their children. I think governments need to relax policies on user charges, policies on school uniforms, because these kind of policies certainly are going to stop a number of students from coming back to school, stop a number of students from continuing their education. So I think that there's a need of a dose of flexibility on the part of policymakers to make it easier for students to continue with their education. This is really a very interesting question. Let me start by perhaps using Chinese character for crisis. The way Chinese characterize crisis is using two characters. One is there's a danger ahead. The second is that there's an opportunity. So really, I believe that we recognize that the pandemic poses serious dangers for education, for safety, for health, but we also know that it also provides opportunities. I think it provides opportunities for innovation because it forces people to think of alternatives, how they can continue to maintain their normal lives, how they can continue to provide quality education to their children. And I think that this opportunity should be seized for parents and the teachers to work together in order to provide alternatives for children to continue their education. One thing that's obvious to me is that we cannot continue the traditional way we have educated students. One option that I see is that there will be need for distances, and distances between teachers and students, distances between students themselves. This calls for a review of teacher-pupil teacher-pupil ratios. It means that we may have to go for smaller classes. It means we may have to go for smaller sizes. It may mean that we may have to go for multi-class regimes, where a teacher may have to teach multi-grades, teaching grade 1 to 3 or 4 to 7, because classes have become smaller. The number of children to be taught have become smaller, which means that we really need to approach this from many different perspectives. It also means that we may have to use different approaches on how we assess learning outcomes. Fortunately, there exists in the world today a lot of innovations that have been carried out. For example, Pratham in India has shown us how you can really assess students and the amount of learning that they've undertaken without necessarily using the traditional approach to assessing learning outcomes. So we need really to take opportunity of this pandemic in order to rethink education, in order to rethink systems of accessing students, systems of ensuring that learning continues among students themselves within small communities. One of the interesting things I've been thinking about recently is that we have a lot of innovations that have taken place in industry and communication. If you think of the iPhone, the iPad, if you think of Facebook, if you think of Amazon, what we need are similar innovations in education. We cannot continue to do business the way we have done it in the past. How can we make one teacher teach many more students through radio, through television? But also, how can we ensure that we avoid a situation where the poorest of the poor, who may not have access to these platforms, are further left behind? All these issues become important. So context matters a lot, because not all countries are at the same level of development. Not all communities are at the same level of development. There may be need for community televisions, community radios, where students can come together within a community and they have access to a world-class teacher teaching on radio or teaching on television. Another issue that I've been thinking really about is, going forward, there are all sorts of sources of knowledge that teachers and the students can access. But what is the problem here? The problem is that in the early years of education, we do not have world-class teachers who can teach children how to read, who can teach basic numeracy. If students could master basic numeracy and the basic literacy, there are opportunities for them to access knowledge, because now they can read with comprehension. They can read to learn. And these kind of tools become very, very important moving forward. But as I said, context matters.